Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar hosted by the Retirement Advantage. Today, we will be providing a tutorial on how to electronically file your year-end census data using Plan Sponsor Link. My name is Bill Sunigal. I'm the Marketing and Communications Director for the Retirement Advantage. Today's presenter is Chris Bettinelli, TRA's Client Relationship Manager. Before we begin, here's a quick review on the functionality of GoToWebinar. Everyone that logs in is on mute to avoid background noises. To submit any questions or comments, please use the chat or questions pane located on the right side of your screen. You can enter your questions and comments there throughout the presentation. Then we'll answer your questions at the end of the webinar. Without further ado, here's Chris.
Thanks, Bill, and welcome everybody. So as Bill mentioned, this is going to be a brief tutorial that'll walk you through TRA's plan year-end data collection process. The way that we do that is we ask all of our clients to access a plan sponsor portal that we call Plan Sponsor Link, and then once you're in that portal, you'll be able to answer a series of questions that will be required so that we can complete your 2019 compliance work. So to access the Plan Sponsor Link, you folks can go to our homepage, which is tra401k.com. And as you can see here on the screen, this would be the landing page of our homepage. If you look up in the upper right-hand corner, you're going to see a login button. What you'll want to do is go ahead and click on that button, and you have two links that you can click on. To access our Plan Sponsor Link, you'll click the one that says Plan Sponsor Link. It's going to bring you to a different site, and it just takes a moment here. Once you access the login page for the Plan Sponsor Link, you'll see here that you would enter a username and a password. If you don't have a username right now, you can look right here towards the bottom underneath the sign in button. You'll see first time user. If you click on that, you'll be able to enter in your email address and register for the Plan Sponsor Link for the first time. If for some reason you forgot your password, you can go ahead and click Forgot Password, and the temporary password will be sent your way. But for those of you that do know your username, it'll always be an email address. So you want to go ahead and enter in your email address and then enter in your password and then choose sign in. From a housekeeping perspective, when you come into the Plan Sponsor Link for the first time, you're going to have this landing page here that is broken down by individual tabs. The first tab that's always going to be highlighted is your My Active Tasks. So there are times where we may ask you folks to take specific action, or if there's certain notices that need to be sent out to your employees, they'll be posted here so you can go ahead and download the notices and then either electronically send them to your employees and or hard mail, however you choose. Across the top, you're going to see other options. You can see distributions that are occurring in your plan. We're going to talk about this data collection in a moment. You have access to your documents. There are ways that you can send TRA or individuals here at TRA secure communications. So if there's certain sensitive files or materials that you want to send to the Retirement Advantage, you can do that through the secure file exchange. For our conversation today, we're going to talk about the year-end data collection process. And you're going to see here towards the bottom, since a lot of you folks are new to TRA as of 2019, this will be your first time, very likely, going into our Plan Sponsor Link. So you'll likely only see one year-end data collection task here. To go ahead and open the task, you look all the way to the right, and you simply choose Begin Task. And now you have entered into our data collection task. So again, from a housekeeping perspective, the way that this would navigate, if you look here right in the middle, you're going to see steps, and each step has a title. As we progress through each one of these steps, you'll see right now the general step is highlighted yellow, When we complete that step, it'll turn green, so you know that you've done everything that was needed for that individual step. And as what we want to do, the goal is to have every one of these arrows green so we can submit the data census to the Retirement Advantage. Over here to the right, you'll notice there's an option for you folks to enter notes as you go along. And these notes will be generated at the end of the report, and we'll show you where they're generated. So if you wanted to add a note, you can simply click on Notes, choose Add, type it in, and submit it. This again will save, and we'll show you where it's saved at the end of this presentation today. So the first step is general and/or company contact information. So a lot of the information that we have came from a variety of different sources. So as you set up and joined the Retirement Advantage, you had provided certain information. So the information that's here is pre-populated based on what was provided during that implementation process. If for some reason you notice any of this information to be incorrect, or there's typos or anything like that, you can choose to edit this, and I would say that you can edit this to get it to the way it needs to be, but since a business address and certain contact information may affect the plan documents, adoption agreements, and things like that, we would ask that you reach out to your client relationship manager. So you'll find that as we go through a lot of these steps today, if there's something that's inaccurate, you can make the edit, but you also want to let us know that a change needs to occur. So when you determine that all the information within the step is accurate, the way that you'll complete that is hit the Save button on the bottom. And so as you can see, if you look up to that general step, we now have a green check mark. And so the next step is company data, employee company data. And again, same applies here. This is information that we gathered through the implementation process. If you folks went through any type of employer identification number change, or for some reason you decided to change your fiscal year end in regards to the 401k plan, you would note that here. And then you would also let us know again. So just reach out to your client relationship manager and let them know that there was a change that occurred to this company data information. Again, when complete, we're going to hit the Save button, and you'll see again the step has now put a green check mark next to company. The next step is principals. This is a list of any owners of the company and the percentage of ownership. So you'll see here in this first line, we have employee A happens to be an owner. In this case, they would very likely be an officer. It wouldn't be no. They probably would be an officer, or maybe not. And the ownership is 50%. So the goal is to make sure, however the company is owned, that it aggregates to at least shouldn't go over 100%. So it would aggregate to 100%. So you can see in this scenario, there's an employee that owns 50%, and maybe there's outside ownership from another company that owns the remaining 50% of your company. You can choose to add owners here. So if you wanted to add an owner, you would simply just choose Add, pick the name of the person or the company, the title, and the percentage of ownership. If they are an officer, that is important. So can they make contractual decisions for the organization? If so, you would probably consider them an officer. You can also choose to edit any piece of information that's already in here. And again, you're going to see the same type of information. Once you make that edit, you would just go ahead and hit Submit. For those of you that may operate a nonprofit organization, the way that you would enter that is you would simply put in a name of the company or the name of the company. You would exclude any titles. You would exclude the officer question, and you would just write 100% here. So that would help us understand that it is a nonprofit. If you wanted to add a note, again, you can go to the mid upper right here and choose the Notes button and add a note to just remind us that you are a nonprofit organization. And then again, to complete this step, you would simply hit Save, and we get the green check mark, so it validates that this is saved. One area to note here, is that if for some reason you're moving along through all the steps and you have other business that you need to take care of, and you will end up logging out of Plan Sponsor Link, when you come back into the data collection task, your progress will be saved. So all the green checks will remain as green checks, and you will not have to go back to change that information. So the section we're on right now is family relationships. It is important for TRA to know if there are any family members within the company. Family members may be considered owners as well via a rule called family attribution. You can choose to add family members, again, by picking the Add button. Traditionally, what's being looked for is parents, grandparents, spouse, children, and grandchildren. So if you have siblings that are working together, you wouldn't really add them as a family member. But if you have a spouse or your parents or your children or any of those types of individuals, those are the ones that you would want to add in this list. Even though we show a lot of different breakdowns here in regards to nephews and nieces and so on, you don't really need to add them in here. So primarily it's spouses, children, parents, grandchildren, grandparents, etc. So if you have any questions in regards to the types of family members that you would want to add in this section here, you would want to reach out to your client relationship manager. And again, to finalize that section, you just hit save, and if you look up top, you will see that green check mark. The next section here is other businesses owned. This section pertains to the owners of the company who are also full or partial owners of any other businesses. So if the owners have any ownership in any other business, that's what you want to enter here. If you have any questions about should I enter a business in this section or not enter a business in this section, or if the owners do have a lot of interest in many businesses that it would seem cumbersome to go ahead and enter that within this section here, feel free to save this and then again reach out to your client relationship manager with any questions. There may be opportunities to send, if it's a very large ownership structure, maybe spreadsheets or some other breakdown in regards to that ownership. And again, if you have no businesses to add there, you would just go ahead and hit save, and you will see the progress up top with that green check mark. So as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of information that just gets loaded from a lot of different systems that were populated through that implementation process or some of the documents that you folks had filled out. This is the contact list. So this is, in most cases, every individual here at the Retirement Advantage that would understand your plan and that has an assignment towards your company. So if going through this, there's something that stands out that seems inappropriate or inaccurate, go ahead and reach out to your client relationship manager, whereas this may need to be changed not only within the plan sponsor link, but there may be other areas of your documents and maybe other systems that this information needs to be changed. So again, if you see anything that's out of the ordinary here, feel free to reach out to your client relationship manager. And again, by hitting save, I think it's important to remind that we do see that green check mark across the top, so you know that progress has truly been saved. So the next step is a questionnaire that if you have offered a 401k in the past, you're probably familiar with other organizations asking you some information about your company itself. That's all this is. As you know, 401ks are, or any retirement vehicles are highly regulated, and there's specific compliance tests that need to take place on a year-over-year basis. One of the services that we provide here at the Retirement Advantage are the year-end compliance services. As a result, there's certain information that's required to help and assist with those tests. So this is the annual employer questionnaire. As you can see, to the right here, most of the responses are going to be simply based on a selection from a drop-down box. There's not a lot of free writing that's being asked here. There's a little bit, but very little. So hopefully these questions are not that difficult to answer. However, if you do have any questions and you're unsure about how to answer any one of these questions, as I said before, you can certainly reach out to your client relationship manager, and they can help either A, walk you through this process and or answer any questions that you do have. Even though this is the first time that you folks are likely going through the data collection process, each year we do save a record of how you respond to these questions. And so let's say we were in 2021 and you're looking to submit the data census for plan year 2020, and you wanted to simply answer the questions based on the way that you answered it last year. If you look across the top where these tabs are, you'll see the tab that says data collection. If we click on this tab, you will see here you have a historical report of all the census reports that we collected in prior years. And so if you were to simply click on the report itself, you would end up getting an Excel visual of how you responded to all of these questions for the prior year. So you're going to see the worksheets on the bottom that seem to correspond with the different steps. And if we move all the way over to the plan, you'll see the questions. The responses that you see here will reflect how you answered it based on the last year-end process. So again, if you wanted to pull some historical record just to make sure that, especially if nothing has changed, you can go ahead and do that. So we'll quickly go through some of these questions so you can get a sense as to the types of questions that are being asked. So the first question here is, did the employer maintain any other retirement plans in addition to this plan that TRA did not provide administrative services for? So if you have a 401k, let's say with the Retirement Advantage, do you offer a profit share plan that is not here at the Retirement Advantage, or that is not a component of your 401k? And I think if you folks fall within this category, you would know that. And so if you don't think so, or you're not sure, the answer is likely that you did not maintain any other plans, and you would just choose that drop down, okay? The second question is, was the business sold or merged within another business during this year? So again, you would know if you sold or merged, and you would choose yes or no. In regards to the 401k, for the plan TRA services, were assets held at multiple investment providers. So this does not mean if you have multiple types of mutual funds or investments available within your 401k plan. It just means, do you have some, let's say you had a 401k that had a total amount of assets of $1 million. And let's say 500,000 of that was held at, as an example, the Principal Group or John Hancock, and the other half might have been held at Fidelity. That would mean you're using two investment providers. But again, it is not if you have multiple mutual funds in your plan, just if you know that you have assets in one organization and assets in another. And so if you do say that you did have multiple investment providers, we would ask that you identify where. And again, you'll see that that's a free write, and you would just write in where it is. The next question is, are your plan's assets currently invested in any non-traditional holdings? So again, outside of quote unquote stocks or mutual funds, do you invest in life insurance or real estate or some sort of mortgages or gold, like buying gold bullion and things like that? If so, you'll just want to answer the yes or no. The average 401k plan is not invested in any non-traditional holdings. So for the most of you, the answer will likely be no. But for those of you that do have non-traditional assets, you'll want to free write what those assets might be. The next question that you'll see is, have all newly eligible employees been offered the opportunity to participate in the plan on their initial entry date based on the eligibility required listed in your plan's adoption agreement? So anytime you have a new employee that is eligible to participate in the plan, regardless if they choose to join or not, you do want to make sure that they are made aware of the plan. So that's what we're asking. Did you make any newly eligible employee aware of the plan? So again, you would choose yes or no through the drop downs. The next question is in regards to eligible employees that were rehired. So in most cases, and if you're unsure, you can feel free to contact your client relationship manager. However, in most cases, if you rehire an employee, it's likely that they are eligible to enter into the plan upon rehire, because that time that passes from their data separation to the rehire is a clock that never stopped ticking. So it's as if they've been employed that long. So in some cases, if somebody separated from service and they came back 6 months later, they now have an additional 6 months counted towards their service. So it is possible they should be offered the plan. So again, if you have this as a situation and you're unsure, feel free to contact your client relations manager. The next question is, on the employee census section of this request, you will be asked to provide employee information for the plan year. The information requested must be provided for all employees receiving W-2 wages, not just those that have chosen to participate in the plan. So what we're saying is when you provide a census to us, we need to have a census of all employees and their compensation. There's some other information that we'll show on another tab, another step, but this is just asking that, hey, you're submitting the employee census, are you showing us all of your employees? If for some reason you're not, again, just reach out to your client relationship manager and we can walk you through. The next question is around any leased employees. Again, if you're leasing any employees and you can see the breakdown and definition of each, you'll want to answer the question appropriately. So it's either yes or no. The next question is around union employees. Do you have any union employees that are subjected to a collective bargaining agreement? And the reason for that is, for those of you that have them, they may have different requirements in regards to either employer contributions or eligibility, vesting, and so on. And so we need to be able to identify who those employees are. Again, just a simple yes or no, and you'll likely be contacted by your client relationship manager. A couple other questions here that are relatively basic. Do you have any employees excluded due to being a non-resident alien with no U.S. earned income? So again, just a simple yes or no. Did any employees terminate due to death or disability in the year? Again, yes or no. If so, please go ahead and list their names. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to your client relationship manager. Under matching contributions, the question is, have you made or do you plan on making a matching contribution for this year? So some folks already make it throughout the year. Some wait till the end of the year, depending on your plan document. So we just want to know if you did make it or do intend on doing that. If so, what is your matching formula? So if you're not doing something that's traditional safe harbor and you're doing your own thing, so 25 cents on the dollar up to 4% in deferrals or something like that, you would need to free write that into this space here, just so we know what it is that either A, you want us to calculate, or what it is that we're testing against. Simple question here, do you need TRA to calculate the match? So some people have their payroll provider calculate the match. I know as part of our traditional testing services, a lot of times we will show you what the match should have been. So in most cases, we are probably going to assist with calculating the match, but if you don't want us to, you can go ahead and say no. And then when do you intend on depositing that contribution is one of the questions. So if for example, you're filling this out today, January 22nd, and you want this deposited within 2 days, it's probably not going to come back with the allocation that quick. We like to put a timeline out there that's about 15 business days out. So if you can give us a little bit of heads up that you're looking to make a contribution so that it's not super tight to any tax filings and so on, that would make it a lot more efficient to go ahead and give you that allocation number. So again, just a note here that we're looking for hopefully at least 15 business days, so it can be an efficient process. Employer discretionary contributions, again, you have matching contributions, which are traditional to somebody putting money in and the employer will give the money. Employer discretionary contributions are traditionally at the end of the year for just about everybody who would be considered eligible to participate in the plan. So we're going to ask similar questions. Do you plan on making an employer discretionary, i.e. profit sharing plan or not? If so, similar questions. What are your goals? Are you looking to give everybody 2% or give everyone $100? You would just write that in there. And again, do you want us to go ahead and calculate that for you? You're going to do it on your own, or when are you planning on making that contribution? Again, we'd like to see those 15 business days prior to making that contribution. The last two questions are for new plans only. So if your plan was brand new during 2019, you'll want to enter the date when you first started deferring into the plan. But if you're not a brand new plan, you don't have to worry about this question. And question 27, the last one, if your plan was started during this plan year, please tell us the employees that made greater than $120,000 in the prior year. What we're looking for is to identify highly compensated employees. And so for those of you that have offered a 401k plan in the past, you probably understand the need for that. For those of you that don't understand the need for the highly compensated employee, again, I would probably direct you to your client relationship manager, and they can certainly answer the need for them. So after you complete all of these questions, you can go ahead and hit save. And it'll bring us to another series of questions that have to do with, we're going to go ahead and just move to 5,500 because I wasn't really answering the questions there. But if you answered them all and hit save, you would get a green checkbox there. Under the 5,500, for those of you that offer a 401k plan, you know that on a yearly basis, you're required to file a Form 5500 to the Department of Labor. And there's certain items that need to be placed on that 5,500. The Retirement Advantage does create a signature-ready 5,500 so that you can file it. And so to ensure that we can do that, there's certain questions that need to be answered. The first question is, did you have any late deferral deposits into your plan? So if you folks are making payroll deposits, you want to make sure that you're doing that as soon as administratively possible, every pay period. If for some reason you forget one and it's months later and realize you didn't upload it to the 401k plan, that's what we're asking for here. So it would be a simple yes or no if you did not get those contributions into the plan in a timely basis. If you did mark yes, the Department of Labor does require that earnings are calculated on the late deposits. So for example, if there was a deposit that was supposed to go in on the 1st of January, but it doesn't go in until March 1st, there's a period of time that that money missed out on potentially earning or getting a positive return from, let's say, the market. And so that's what we call earnings. So there's a required calculation that needs to take place to ensure that that money has an appropriate amount of earnings applied to it when the deposit's actually made. So you can ask us to calculate that. Most employers do ask us to do that. All of you folks are required, as a plan sponsor, not as individuals, but as a plan sponsor, you're required to have what's called a fidelity bond. It's usually offered by an insurance agent, and if you don't have one, you definitely want to make sure you get one. It has to be in the value of at least 10% of the 401k assets, and it does not need to exceed $500,000 in coverage. A fidelity bond is something that protects the plan from mishandling of the funds, embezzlement, those types of things, but it is a requirement. So you do need to indicate if you have one or do not have one for 2019. Then the next question under it is you would need to enter the value of that bond. Again, is it $250,000? Is it $1,000? And again, it only needs to be 10% of the assets. So if you had $1 million, it would have to be a $100,000 bond, but you would want to write that number in here. The next question is, has there been a resolution to terminate the plan? Again, you would know that, yes or no. Simply answer that. That means you no longer want to be a plan sponsor, no longer want to offer the 401k plan to your employees. The next question, were any assets or liabilities transferred from this plan to another qualified plan or into this plan from another qualified plan? So if you moved your plan from one provider to the next, not a third-party administrator, but if, let's say, you were with John Hancock, you moved to Fidelity or vice versa, that would be a transfer of assets, and you would want to go ahead and say yes there, okay? And if you have the applicable information, plan name, EIN, etc., please go ahead and note that in the system here. And the last question, well, the second to last question in regards to the 5500 is just more informational, just letting you know that the way the Department of Labor asks to have the 5500 filed is electronically. And so you do need to access a system and set up or register to become a filer for the Department of Labor. And this here is really noting how you would do that. If you have any questions in regards to how to get an electronic filing user set up, you can feel free to reach out to your client relationship manager, or you could go to the DOL and look up this weird term that says e-fast, the letter E and the word fast, and you'll see some information in regards to that. But certainly feel free to contact us and we can answer any questions. And then finally, it's entirely up to you. It's 100% optional. Would you be willing to be a reference for future clients of TRA? And you would just simply choose yes or no in regards to that. Ordinarily, you would hit save there. You would get your green check mark, but for demonstration purposes, we're just going to move to the final task that's looking for information from you. This is a traditional census. For those of you that had a 401k or have been operating a 401k for quite some time, you do understand that you would send us a census of, again, all the employees, and there's specific information that's required. If you look at the columns here, you'll see that we obviously want the name of the employee, social security number, date of birth, original hire date, any dates of separation, why they separated, dates of rehire, gross compensation, and as you go along, you'll see pre-entry compensation, bonus, overtime, different types, and then towards the end here, you'll also see that we want to know, did they defer into the 401k plan? Did the employer give a match? Were there any other employer contributions? And then we want to know their hours, okay? So most of these columns may not apply to a lot of your employees, so you just want to make sure that you just add only what applies to your employees. So if you're not making employer contributions, then that column does not apply. If there's no bonuses, then that does not apply, those types of things. From a housekeeping perspective, you can see how this page navigates. You can add employees by choosing add. You can delete employees by choosing delete. You can edit anything that's in here. And by the way, if you do have information that's pre-populated in here, it's pre-populated traditionally based on the prior year census that was uploaded. So it's not changed for that year. So for example, if you were with us in 2018, you would see 2018 data in here, so names of employees and so on, and you would need to go in and just simply update, did they earn a little bit more for 2019? Are they terminated? You put in termination dates, etc. So you're basically editing the prior year's census information, okay? So for those of you that don't have a lot of employees, it may be easy to add, delete, and edit right here in this setup. For those of you that may have a lot of employees, and for each organization that's subjective, but let's say you had 100 or 200 employees and you don't want to go in one by one. If you look to the left here, we have an import-export feature. What you would want to do is export the file to Excel. As you can see, you get a drop down, and I've already done this just for demonstration purposes. So you get the export in Excel format, and you can go in and change this. What you can't change is the column headings. So you want to make sure all the columns stay in the order that they're in, and all the headings stay the same. But what you're going to change is the data that falls underneath all these column headings. So if for some reason John Smith now has a data separation, you'll just go ahead and enter his data separation and enter in his gross compensation. Okay. You're going to notice on the bottom that there are two worksheets. It is important that both these worksheets stay intact. So you can save this into a folder within your computer, but you do need to make sure that the formatting stays exactly the same, or you won't be able to load it back into the system. So again, don't change any of the columns, don't change any of the headings, and don't remove this instruction tab. This here will help answer any questions in regards to all of those columns. One of the things that comes up quite a bit is the reason for separation. A lot of people, may separate from service because they were fired or they voluntarily left and so on. That's really not what we're looking for. There's only a few key terms that make sense in that category, at least for the system. So you're really only going to choose that they terminated for either the reason of death, the reason of disability, or termination. So not terminated or anything like that. It would actually have to be termination. So when we're over here, you'll see here where it says reason for separation, you choose termination and not terminated. If it said terminated and we try to load it in the system, it won't load in. So it is a little sensitive, but again, the instructions are there to help you along. And I'll say it again, feel free to contact your client relationship manager if you have any questions or difficulties. So just to give you an example of importing this in, so you'll see the export button, the import button is right next to it. If we go ahead and hit this, you're going to have the option to find that Excel file that's on your computer wherever you saved it. And I'm going to go ahead and see if we can find one here. And this is the one that I was just showing. So I found it. It shows me the name of it. I'm going to go ahead and import this into the system. So it gives me some results and it tells me how many records. So if you had 200 employees, it would say 200 employees. You'll go ahead and hit continue. You'll see across the top here that it says issues have been detected. You can click to view the issues. The way our system works is it will give what's called warnings and errors. So a warning is just a heads up saying, hey, you entered an employee into the system, but they didn't have any deferrals. So as an example here, you'll see this is a warning. And it says in most cases, at least one employee will have deferrals. If you have many that don't have deferrals and you save, it'll allow you to save it anyways. It's just giving you a heads up. However, the errors are errors and they need to be resolved before you can complete the step. So for example, this one here, if you look to the right, it says Jim Jones and it says hours is required. So he must have showed compensation or didn't show compensation. And so the hours and or compensation need to be entered into the system before it'll let you go through that. Okay. And then if somebody doesn't have a social security number, those types of things, it would need to be resolved. So again, if you think about it, a warning is you can pass through. It's just letting you know, it's give you a heads up, and then an error just won't let it get through. If you have any questions or have any difficulties trying to load this information, again, feel free to reach out to your client relationship manager, and they can obviously help you through that. So once we get through all of these steps and we see each one of these with a green check mark, and that would include this plan and 5,500 and employees, you now can go to the approval step. If you look on this page here, if you loaded in any documents or if for some reason there was any information you wanted to present to us, you can now add this here. The notes, as I mentioned earlier, if you were entering notes as you were progressing through these steps, these would be populated here. And so when our compliance analyst goes into the system, they will see any relevant documents and or notes. You don't have to put any here. And again, if you have questions, you can contact your client relationship manager. But assuming you feel very comfortable that everything that you put in the system is accurate to the best of your ability, you're not going to be held totally accountable for the information, meaning if something's not right, we will reach out to you and give you a call and say, hey, we don't understand the information that was put in here. So we're just saying that you kind of went through this as best you can and entered what you could to the best of your ability. So assuming you get to that point and you're comfortable, you would go ahead and hit sign and submit. You'll get a pop-up box that'll ask you to just go ahead, approve the entire census submission, and then the task will be closed. So you won't have any additional steps in regards to submitting the actual census data. So at this point, your year-end data would now have been submitted to TRA for review. And as I mentioned earlier, if we have any additional questions, we will reach out to you and via email and or phone call to try to get any of those questions resolved. I know I've been asking you folks if you are suggesting that you reach out to a client relationship manager. For those of you that aren't sure of the phone number, I'll go ahead and give that to you now. It's 1-888-872-2364. And if you know your client relationship manager's name, you could enter in that extension. If you know the extension, you can search them by name. And if for some reason you don't know who your client relationship manager is, when you connect with the individual that answers the phone, they can make sure they find out who's assigned to your case and get you right over to them. So hopefully you found this presentation helpful, and that is the conclusion of the annual data collection process.
Thanks, Chris.
Are there any questions?
Yep, we were going to open up the questions now, but before we begin, I just want to let all attendees know that this webinar was recorded, and you'll receive an email tomorrow with a link to view the tutorial at your discretion. And it looks like we did have a couple of questions that individuals have submitted, and I'll go ahead and read those off to you, Chris. If I need to exit the collection partway through, will the information I previously answered save, or will I need to re-enter it?
It's a great question. As I said a bit earlier, as you progress through the data collection process, assuming you've hit saved and you do see that green check mark, you will not have to worry about entering any information that's within that green check mark.
Thank you. Next question. Our plan has 2 participating employers, but only one is showing under the company tab. Is there a way for us to add another company?
So what you want to do in regards to that is, again, you want to reach out to your client relationship manager, and they'll be able to work behind the scenes to go ahead and get them added into the system.
Thank you. Next question. On the employee tab, do we list every single employee employed for 2019, or only those that were in our 401k plan in 2019?
So, and again, it is important to stress, and I think I mentioned a little bit earlier, you do want to make sure that you are entering all employees into that employee census. So anybody that was an actual employee in 2019, be sure to list them in that census. We want to make sure that it's as accurate as possible, and the regulations do require that it's not just those that are deferring in the plan itself.
Thank you. Someone had asked to repeat the phone number. The 800 number is 888-872-2364. Again, that's 888-872-2364. Next question. For principals section, does principal also mean to the shareholder who owns the company?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the answer is yes. Now, if you have like a variety of shareholders that own the company, so for example, if there's, I don't know, like 100 employees that own 10% or however it works, you could probably, bulk it in here under the name and say 10% ownership, 100 individuals or 10 individuals or something like that. And then to the far right, just write 10% ownership. So you do want to identify. Theoretically, I mean, there might be a point where people less than 5% may or may not need to be identified, but we need to gross up to 100%. So if you do have many that fall under a small percentage, you can kind of group them as one to get them to something that's relevant. So if it's 5 or 10 or 20%, just say, employees with less than 2% ownership, but it totals 20% ownership of the company itself.
Thanks, Chris. Next question. When does this have to be submitted?
So that's a really great question. So we send out a reminder email or initial email to let you know that everything is now set up in the system for you to go ahead and populate your annual census data. The quicker that we can get this in, the quicker that we can get to work on your annual compliance test. In regards to this industry and even the testing, there are some well, they're not really arbitrary. There are some deadlines that can be pretty aggressive. So one of the first deadlines is March 15th, and that just means that if there were some type of a compliance failure and monies needed to be distributed for whatever reason, that would need to be distributed by March 15th. So, if, as you can see now, we're towards the end of January, it may take a little bit of time to go ahead and complete the annual testing. And the last thing you want to do is kind of get too close to that March 15th deadline. So I would say that you'd want to get it to us as soon as possible. So if you do have access to get into the data collection process now, you want to, get into it and start, putting in some of that information so we make sure that we have that on file. If you have any questions about, creeping up on a deadline, or it's getting kind of late and you're not sure how you're going to get it done, feel free to reach out to the client relationship manager and they can probably help you with the process as well.
Thank you. Next question. Can you please refresh on what is included in compensation to determine highly compensation?
So when it comes to compensation, it depends. So in the plan document itself, you may have some definition that excludes certain types of compensation. But for those of you that don't, generally speaking, you would probably just say anything that falls under W-2 wages. Okay, so there are circumstances where fringe benefits may either fall into that or be excluded from that. But for general purposes, it's W-2 wages. If you have folks that are K-1 earners or have earned income of some sort, you probably want to reach out to your client relationship manager. They can kind of walk you through that, because then what might come into consideration is, are they sharing ownership with other individuals? And if they are K1, do they have certain expenses that are split between them and the other owners? So it can get a little complicated, but if you have any questions about that, again, just feel free to reach out to the client relationship manager.
Thank you. Next question. If there are employees on the census who didn't work in 2019, do we delete or simply include the date they were separated from employment?
Well, it depends. So if they were separated from service in 2018 and they just never were updated for whatever reason, because we can't put a termination date in the system that is for a prior year. It doesn't, because it's irrelevant. They're like, well, they're not employees in 2019, so they don't need to be in there. So if that type of an individual worked in 18 but terminated in 18 as well, but it just never got updated, you could take them off that census.
Thank you. Next question. We make safe harbor contributions, so should I answer no to mathing and discretionary contributions?
It depends. So as a plan sponsor, and it depends on the plan document, some employers make safe harbor contributions and possibly even do discretionary non-elective, which could be like a profit share at the end of the year. So I guess each circumstance would determine how you're going to answer that. But if the question is based on somebody that has no intentions of making other contributions other than safe harbor, the answer would be yes to that.
Thank you. Next question. What if the shareholders do reside in out of state? Wait, I'm sorry. What if the shareholders do reside in out of the states? not participated in 401k plan. Do we still list them even if they do not defer to the plan?
So again, if there, you can choose to generalize little small amounts of ownership. So if the shareholders, again, do not really have a big stake or share of the organization itself, then you could just generalize and say just that it's shareholders that do not work for the company, and they would not participate in the plan, and just kind of generalize that. I will say that there are possibilities where some ownership could create what's called control groups, or if they're family members, they have small amounts, but they're still family members. They get brought in different ways. So I think that if we're talking about just lumping a lot of shareholders, that's okay. But if it's just one or two people that have small amounts, it might be just best just to list them. But again, and I hate to always defer, but I think to be safe rather than sorry, it's probably a good idea just to kind of contact the client relationship manager, and they have a lot of tools and resources that they could look at to help better answer any specific questions like that.
Thank you. Last question. How do I get my accountant access to the site to answer these questions?
So it's a great question. There's and they're all great questions. There's a way that you can give third-party access, and what you'll want to do is just simply contact your client relationship manager, and they'll be able to set them up in a system behind the scenes here, and then we can send out access to your plan via the plan sponsor link. So essentially, they're going to be able to access it in a similar way that you do and see a lot of what you can see through the plan sponsor link. But again, the best starting point for that is the client relationship manager.
Okay, a couple more questions came in. If we use TRAs 316, do we still have to complete this information?
So assuming, and I know as part of the 316 process, a lot of the census is sent on a regular basis, and I'm sure that's why the question is being asked. If we have the full year census, then we will go ahead and upload that census into Plan Sponsor Link. However, we will have you go in and just verify it. So it should be current. So in that circumstance, you're not going to see the prior years. You're going to see the current testing year, the one that we're going to be testing for. And so what you're doing is just going in and looking for inaccuracies. So it won't be as much of a change to everything as it might be, oh, this is off for some reason and we're just tweaking it. So the answer is the census will be loaded in on your behalf for the current testing year.
Thank you. Next question. Your form shows 2019 as the reporting first year in some of the questions verbiage. However, my online form shows 2018 as the new first plan year in the same questions. I'm disregarding the 2018 typo error and assuming it means 2019. Is this okay?
Yeah, I think that's, I mean, again, not understanding the specific circumstance, I don't know if the plan maybe became effective in 18 or not, or there is a possibility that it's a typo. So again, I think just reaching out to the client relationship manager, asking that question, they can do a little bit of research behind the scenes and determine if it should be changed to say 2019. But if it's if you don't see another task in there, and you know that your plan was not effective in any way, shape, or form for 2018, then I would definitely contact the client relationship manager.
Okay. Thank you, Chris. And it looks like that was the last question submitted. So if there are no other questions, we're going to go ahead and wrap up this webinar session. If you would like to continue the conversation, please contact your dedicated CRM directly at 888-872-2364. Again, that's 888-872-2364. We appreciate your time and participation. Thank you very much, and have a great rest of the day.